Hi. All right. So we're talking about Scream, Pain, Love. This is from my pamphlet, Scream, Pain, Love, that was published with Everyday Analysis this year. And what I was trying to do in it, and my love to Munch, is trying to contrast him to some problematic parts of Heidegger's philosophy and existential philosophy in general, to extend maybe the negative part of existential philosophy to coexistence with others, because existential philosophy is too much, I think, concentrated on the individual and suffering of the individual. So I love Munch, the Norwegian artist who is in close proximity to existential philosophy. He felt that he's close to Kierkegaard, his paintings, and he didn't know about Kierkegaard when he started to paint, and someone told him that about Kierkegaard, and he actually said that there is a proximity between them. But there is an obvious link. Munch, in a similar way like Kierkegaard, had tragic love life. In case of Munch, except for unlike Kierkegaard, he was alcoholic, and he suffered in a similar way like Kierkegaard the death of his beloved ones, his older sister, and premature death of his mother, and all of his love affairs were doomed, were highly unsuccessful. And I think that this is not because he didn't know love enough, as we prefer to think, didn't practice enough or something like this, but on the contrary, because he knew the heart of human love too well. He knew the other side of love that I claim is inevitable part of love. So he would write about his painting that, and he was a deeply depressed guy. He would claim that his art comes from feeling of anxiety, and what he shows, if you take away his anxiety, you will take away himself. And this is close to Kierkegaard, who would claim that anxiety is in the heart of human existence. He would also claim that through his art, he manifests his innermost heart. So what we'll see in his paintings is his heart, in case of Scream, his screaming heart. So some inner reality of human existence. And what is even more important for me, for us today, is the inner reality of coexistence with others. Even though the main painting, Scream, doesn't represent it that much, but we'll look at some other paintings. So what it represents, what his art represents, is his innermost heart and his anxious heart. Heidegger, this is just one passage to remind you about Heidegger's philosophy and my interest in the negative side of Heidegger philosophy. For him, the anxiety is always there in human existence. This is what defines Dasein, specifically human existence. One cannot get rid of anxiety, angst, because it's always there. It's only sleeping for Kierkegaard, for Heidegger. But the problem with Heidegger's conception, that he would define human existence of an individual in this way, of the individual as separate from the other. And there's also positive twist on Heidegger's concept of anxiety and his concept of being towards death, that defines also defines human existence, because it's like a call. Yes, he would claim in a quite pessimistic way that this anxiety is structural to our being, that we are profoundly homeless in this world. There is nothing to hold on to. And once we feel anxious, we get in touch with the with nothingness in ourselves. Nothingness in ourselves is the other way to interpret his concept of being towards death. Human existence, Dasein, is being towards death, meaning death or destruction, we can say, is not physical death, but the destruction that is going on, the principle of destruction that is going on is structural to life. So life can be seen as defined by death, as death, death approaching, existence that is approaching its limit, meaning meaning that it can be seen as unfoldment of nothingness that we really are, being towards death. Death is structural to existence, not as something that ends existence. So, and anxiety is a way of feeling it, the core of human existence, the nothingness that is at the heart of who we are. The positive twist of existential philosophy is that by kind of letting yourself, embracing maybe being towards death and letting yourself feel in this way existentially anxious, you acquire authentic self, authentic existence. You transcend the immanence of your existence. So it's positive twist, you're getting something out of it. And this is for me, one of the problems was Heidegger philosophy. Like there is something you're getting out of the anxiety that is structural, and there is no way to get out of it. Something good, you become in a way good. And the other, it's not positive twist, but some consolation that this concept of anxiety and of being towards death has been limited to individual. The consolation that it provides is that the others, it's limited to individual, and Heidegger would explicitly claim that one cannot live encounter your own death. This is the only thing that genuinely belongs to you. And this to go through, and this kind of anxiety is to go through a process of individualization. It's maybe admit your own loneliness and throwness in the world, and being separate individual. It provides consolation because in this conception means that being with others, or Mitsein, provides you comfort, you escape from anxiety, you escape from admitting that your existence is being towards death, this inner anxious heart. And this for Heidegger would be associated with inauthentic existence, like consolation that we find in other, escaping in being with others, in non-critically defined ways of existing in the world. For Heidegger, being with others is being comforted by others. And it's not that positive twist, because he would claim, like he would imply that we need to escape, like we need to admit the thrownness, the isolation, to become authentic self. But I would later claim, and I claim in this pamphlet, that being with others, coexistence with others, is not less anxious than the anxiety of being isolated individual. Like there's an anxiety not only in the inner heart of a human being, human subject, but in between, like in nature, everywhere, at the core of existence as such, not specifically human existence. And yeah, let's take a look, Munch's painting finally. So his most famous painting, even if there is a huge amount of his paintings and a lot of variants of his Scream, but for some reason we only know mostly him by this painting. And this one, the famous one, sorry. This one is the perfect demonstration of this Heidegger's philosophy, the one I just described, where there is isolation. When you detach from others, you encounter your own loneliness, you get in touch with your screaming heart. And Munch paints here himself, like you encounter, one could say, the anxiety of your existence. And we'll take a look in a bit what Munch writes about this painting. But his friends are walking away, and so he's not able to find comfort in his friends. He's experiencing the scream, getting in touch with his screaming heart, so to say, and becomes the screaming heart. Maybe gets in touch with nothingness that he actually is, his Dasein, anxious Dasein. And maybe for these reasons, his face is blurred, so it's like disappearing into the outside of himself. And the painting has the anxious colors, so the scream can be seen as painting that represents the existential, encountering existential angst, which is at the core of human existence. And let's see what he writes about his painting. So he was walking with his friends over this bridge, and suddenly sky turned blood red, and he paused, and there's blood and tongues of fire above blue-black fjord and the city. My friends walk on, and I stood there trembling with anxiety, and I sensed the infinite scream passing through nature. Let's maybe come back to it. So one could say that he encountered the unheimlich, the uncanny part, the homelessness of his existence, the one that Heidegger claims that we need to get in touch to become authentic being. And this can be seen as becoming authentic being, but in a positive, if you want to see it in a positive way, being not able to detach to yourself, to define, to the definition of who you are, existing definition of who you are, to find yourself and being detached from others, not being able to find a comfort in others. In this way, in such interpretation, it is then becoming, might be seen as becoming authentic self by getting in touch with the scream inside of you and becoming the scream. But there's also interesting twist that he adds at the end of here, at the end of his passage about this painting, that it was infinite scream passing through nature. That's what he felt. And later he would also claim that about his picture, the scream, that nature was screaming in his blood, which is also interesting because it is he's screaming, he's showing his anxious heart, but it's also nature screaming in him. And it was a couple of attempts, some attempts to show nature as anxious, but in a giving it kind of twist of ecology, like we pollute nature and this is why nature is screaming. But what if it's what if one can provide even in a way deeper, more pessimistic comprehension that nature as such is screaming? It's not his scream as a scream of Dasein specific to human existence, but he felt the nature in himself. He let the nature through himself, and nature is the anxious one, the anxious scream that you get in touch to. And this goes against the pessimistic philosophy comprehension of human being as the most anxious one. Like our consciousness is overly developed more than in other species. That's why we're anxious. We detach from nature, and that's what makes us anxious, our big brain, big mind. And here is and it can be seen like it, one can interpret this painting in this way to support this view, but it can also be seen, not only this picture, but others, some of his paintings, and maybe I'll show you at the end, also can be seen as the universe is screaming through you. You get in touch with yourself, and you get in touch with the whole universe, and this is how you feel anxious. This is how you feel anxiety. you disappear and everything else disappear, and everything else can be seen as disappearance, the anxious disappearance. So it's one of the alternative interpretations of this painting. But let's come back to conventional interpretation of Heidegger's existential philosophy, and this painting that can be used as a demonstration of it. So Munch, who is depicted here, feels anxiety, being detached from others, encountering the true essence of his existence. This is anxiety, and therefore, this is what Scream represents. But and what interests me is this detachment from others, because of this detachment, not being able to find a comfort in others, separation from other, feeling this kind of anxiety is anxiety that is Heideggerian in a way, because it includes separation from the others. Like others can be seen here, his friends, and his walk with the friends can be seen as comforting. But the actual painting that is called Anxiety, and I will discuss it in a minute, actually might be seen as the painting that depicts anxiety of being with others. And the main goal of this pamphlet and of my discussion today is to show that anxiety, unheimlich, uncanniness of Dasein, there's not only anxiety of Dasein, individual existence, of individual subject isolated with others, who discovers this isolation and themselves as nothing at their heart. There's not only this anxiety, but there's also anxiety of being with others, and heimlich, uncanniness of being with others. Anxiety is maybe not only at the heart of existence of a subject isolated from other, but also in between subject, what defines the relationship with people, with each other, and the nature as such. Because for Heidegger, it was different. For Heidegger, this one is anxiety, unheimlich. When you get in touch with yourself, encounter nothingness that defines you, encounter your own death as structural to your existence. And this, the Mitsein, being with others, interrelational perspective, for him was more like escape from anxiety. And I was trying to claim that it's similarly anxious. Being with others is not less anxious at the core than getting in touch with the inner core of yourself, the nothingness of who you are. So this unheimlich, anxiety, it's not only something that defines individual existence, Dasein, but also something that defines Mitsein. And for Heidegger, it was more like go get in touch with anxiety in yourself, instead of escaping into the comfort of others. And in my perspective, it's more pessimistic because there is nowhere to escape. It's because anxiety is constitutive, is defining, this existential anxiety is defining to both. You cannot escape it, and there is no way to escape it. And for Heidegger, by getting in touch with this, you become authentic being. And I think you never become, does it even mean becoming authentic being? It's positive twist that one maybe supposed to have to encounter Dasein, both Dasein and Mitsein, but I'm not sure that the end of the road is death that defines your existence, not authentic existence. So let's see on the painting that is actually called Anxiety in Munch, and we see same bridge, but now there are people on this bridge. And so it's Mitsein, it's being with others. And it is this being with others, the painting that is called an anxiety. So it goes contrary to Heidegger's definition of anxiety as structural to Dasein, to individuals, existence as separated from others. Now, there are lots of interpretations of this painting, but what we can say to support this kind of view of anxious Mitsein, anxious being with each other, is that this being with others that we see here, it doesn't provide the comfort of others' company. It's also same anxiety that they feel. Their phrases might be better structured than Munch's scream, but it's not like good enough to count as authentic or non-authentic existence. So they are anxious at the same time, and it like presents that you are one of them, you're in the same bridge with them, you're next to them, you feel the proximity of them. So this group of people, and they don't look happy, they don't look comforted by each other. It's rather than and they look nowhere, like it's not the gaze is not directed, it's rather like looking nowhere. It's quite anxious gaze. And so despite of this closeness to each other, they don't experience comfort of each other. It's still anxiety, maybe different anxiety, because it's anxiety of them being in themselves, not even though they are with each other, but at the same time, this anxiety of being within themselves, despite of being with each other, is what they share. So it's both anxiety of isolation, anxiety of being with others, twofold, we can say, anxiety. So they at the same time united by the commonly shared feeling of existential tragedy of existence. And we can say that what represents anxiety here is not represented through faces, but represented through their dark clothing that is blended. The dark, it's like a dark mass of anxiety, and faces are appearing similar, faceless faces here and there out of this blurb of anxiety. Even though in some of other paintings, similar paintings of anxiety, and Munch has a couple of variants of all paintings, they're more distinguished. But here they don't become authentic beings. Neither they are forming authentic relationship. It's just anxiety all the way. So this one of the paintings, and the to show that anxiety is not only within us, but in between us, and we are not necessarily comfort to each other, but also anxiety as structural to human relationship. And other painting is Vampire, or alternative name is Kiss, no, Pain and Love. And here we can see the anxiety of the romantic relationship. And on the superficial glance, one might say that this painting depicts a romantic couple in love, and couple in embrace, a woman kissing man on a neck. And this is what we in a similar way do with romantic relationship, romanticizing romantic relationship, love, preferring to think that it can only have the positive side of it, the side of complete presence of love without negative sides like suffering, anxiety. And this, I would call it the learned blindness. We probably have to learn to be blind to the necessary structural opposite side of love that brings pain, because it's the opposite of love. It's the absence of love. So love also exists as not only human Dasein, human subject exists as approaching its limit, as being towards death, and as being death structurally that unfolds, but also love and relationship, we can say similarly exist as approaching its limit. and at the nothingness, the opposite of itself, as at its heart, approaching its own limit, and the nothingness of itself as enfolding, manifesting itself. So to sustain human love and human relationship, one must probably be blind to the negative side of love, which is structural to it. It's a traumatizing part of it. And this is what pop psychology would teach, and this is how to do it, claiming that whenever negative side of love is manifested, this can be seen as a progress in relationship, or that there are some techniques that one can learn to make it a part of the progress. Like the pop psychology right now functions as in relation to relationship, functions as this blindness of not seeing the negative part of relationship. And probably to sustain relationship, one needs to be blind in this way, because it's too painful feeling to know that love at the core is absence of love, or love is profoundly anxious. And that's what I would claim Munch knew too well, this negative side of love. And therefore, because of this, he was not able to form relationship. When you know it too well and it starts to be too painful, you're not able to proceed, you're not able to bear it. You probably need to have some illusions of a positivity of love to be able to sustain it and to bear it. So this painting, if we blind enough, what we can see here is the romantic couple in love. But if you're not blind, and what the title of the painting is showing us is the negative side, the vampire, or love and pain as alternative, like there is a painful part of it, and the generally dark colors of a painting suggest that there is something wrong, there's something dark going on with this couple. That at the same time it depicts love, but also the absence of love, anxiety of relationship, where we escape maybe from anxiety in ourselves to relationship with others, but what we encounter is only different kind of anxiety in both. So it's couple in embrace, and this perception, the positive perception that doesn't let us to see the negative side of love. This negative side, except for dark colors, it can be also seen. So the title suggests that vampire, that meaning that it's not the kiss, it's a bite. The woman probably is a vampire who is biting the man, meaning sucking his inner energy, meaning depriving him of his existence, right? And the red color of woman hair, red color in Munch means blood, and in different way. And we'll take a look in one more painting where he uses a red color to demonstrate veins in nature. So red color can be seen as sometimes it's compared to a spider web, meaning that woman is capturing her prey in a spider web, reappropriating the prey, making it her own, making it her property. So it's not which on outside might look like gentle kiss, it's actually the action of appropriation and draining the beloved, the man's straight. But it can also be seen the red color of her hair, and because one of the romantic partners, that unsuccessful romantic partners that Munch has, she had the red color hair, and he didn't like her, and there was a reason not to like her. But it can also be seen, except for captivating prey into a spider web, it can also be seen as blood, as veins, or as umbilical umbilical cord. This is the connection. At the same time, it's taken away straight, appropriating, but at the same time, because of this very operation, it gives straight, it sustains life in man, or maybe in both of them. This connection that gives life at the same time and takes life away. And one can talk about the image of mother here as at the same time, so meaning that this operation of caring has its dark side. It's never perfectly positive care when you just give care. It also has the dark side of it when it's the opposite of care, when you not only give life but simultaneously take life away, make this life your own by taking it away. And man doesn't look that much alive here. Even though at the same time it looks like an act of care, it can be seen as an act of the opposite of care. And my claim would be here that this is not the depiction of some kind of toxic relationship or relationship that went wrong, or some kind of woman that femme fatale that only pretends to love but actually using a man. I would claim, would make more radical claim that this is love as such, and a woman in love or person in love as such. You cannot love perfectly without the dark side of taking one's life away. And the way pop psychology would resolve this, that you just would claim that, so this is the twofold nature of love, at the same time giving life, and by the very, but very existence of itself takes life away. Giving and taking it away as simultaneous things, the dialectics, anxious dialectics of love. And pop psychology would, the suggestions that are there, it's normally just to separate each other enough to the extent that it's not love anymore. It doesn't feel like love, or it doesn't, people don't behave like love. And this is the solution that would be called healthy relationship, when to the extent where it's not relationship anymore, it doesn't hurt. Yay, it doesn't hurt. The only problem that it's not relationship anymore, because relationship has this dialectical part to itself, where it's good and bad at the same time simultaneously. And once you get rid of the anxious heart of it, you get rid of the whole thing, unfortunately. It can be also seen, I think I'm comparing it in pamphlet with the Siamese twins who are joined in symbiosis, and at the same time they cripple each other, they destroy each other, but this destruction what sustains life in them. And it's maybe the great symbol of any human relationship, not relationship went wrong, but relationship that are still relationship, destroying and at the same time creating this painful link and impossibility to of this junction between them. So anxiety is not only within them. The man doesn't look that he's safe from anxiety of his existence, like it's getting even worse now. If you seek for relief from your anxiety, this is what you get, the anxiety of being with others. There is no escape from this anxiety except for changing the mode of it. Either it's anxiety, profound anxiety of being with others, or profound anxiety of being separated from others. And we can also claim that being separated from others, this ideal, Heideggerian ideal of being isolated, getting in touch, being kind of authentic, sovereign subject, it's also special relationship to others. You can never be, and this is what Heidegger would claim, we are always in Mitsein, like Dasein is Mitsein. The existence of the subject is coexistence with others, but which means that there is no way to escape. There is no you separated from the others. Isolation from others also form of relation to them, maybe the most profound form of relation to them. Isolation is also relation, it's also a link that includes the opposite of itself. All right, so one of the last paintings I will discuss is the Kiss. And it's very interesting to comprehend it through still thinking that they're both screaming. even though we don't see their faces. Let's just assume that whoever Munch depicts are screaming, right? He's screaming, I scream, you scream, everyone screams. Munch is see himself, his inner heart as screaming. Hearts of meaning, let's say that every subject is screaming subject as such. So therefore, in these paintings, they're screaming too. But what they do, they dissolve themselves, including their scream, in each other. And we can say that they find comfort, maybe, in being with each other. So they dissolve their scream, or they mute their scream, but at the same time, it deprives them of them. They don't exist anymore. So there's this anxiety. It's also the modification of a type, can be seen as a modification of type of anxiety or type of a scream. And it's interesting to see this painting, like to think of a scream as something we start our life with. Let's say that a human infant, human child is born into existence, appear into existence with scream. And let's assume that, well, this is true, but for most cases, let's assume that this scream manifests the anxiety. It's not, normally we wouldn't say that child is suffering from anxiety. It kind of comes later, we suppose, but let's assume that it does. It just, we normally tend to think the opposite way, that childhood is blissful. But let's say that we start with the scream. And I would write in a pamphlet that mother mutes the scream by embrace. But what I actually meant is that you physically mute child through breastfeeding with your breast. You just dissolve their scream in unity with you. But inside, we can say that through this, we internalize we internalize our scream, or we mute our scream, but at the same time it implies, it just switches the inner scream or inner anxiety into the mode of anxiety of coexistence with others, where we dissolve ourselves, we die into the other. And in this painting we see that in the form of a kiss or embrace or breastfeeding or something like it. The scream is dissolved, but at the same time, we are dissolved with the scream. So it's anxiety of coexistence with others. It at the same time dissolved, but metaphorically, we can say that it's also amplified by joining of two screams together. Maybe it's so loud we cannot hear the scream as a result. So it's not the absence of scream. It's not the absence of anxiety when we are together. It's just different modification of anxiety. Maybe it's more anxiety. I'll just show you for no reason. My favorite painting from Munch is The Flower of Pain, that I'm not mentioning in the pamphlet, but just wanted to show you how, as a proof, because the topic that I'm not developing in the pamphlet is the nature scream. It's only scream within us and scream in between us, but it's also suffering within us and in between us. But we can also add nature to it. And here you can see Munch, who is suffering, probably because of the unsuccessful love affair, but it's also gives life to a flower. And at the same time, it's a flower that through these veins, the red veins, sustains his life, but at the same time hurts him and sustains him. And there's this connection, interesting connection here of nature with the suffering persons through blood. And it also reminds me Lacan's statement that when he talks about lilies of the valley as perhaps indefinitely painful, of their existence as perhaps indefinitely painful, even though coming from completely different logic that I would support. But the idea that it's nature, there is suffering indefinitely, and through our anxiety we get in touch with this unbearable suffering in that unites every living, maybe non-living thing. All right, that's it for me. It was much more than 20 minutes, I'm sorry. I'll stop recording somewhere and we can proceed to discussion.